The main plaza of New Geneva Station buzzed with activity. Traders from dozens of worlds moved between the shops and restaurants. The air smelled of strange spices and alien foods. Children from many species played together near the central fountain while their parents conducted business. 7-year-old Minji Park sat cross-legged on the smooth floor, completely absorbed in her holographic toy. The small device projected dancing butterflies that fluttered around her in bright colors. She giggled as she tried to catch them with her tiny hands. Her father, Dr. Park Hyun-woo, worked nearby on a maintenance panel, occasionally glancing over to check on his daughter. The diplomatic reception was in full swing. Ambassador Keth Vol from the Altarian Empire stood with her delegation near the fountain. The Altarians were tall, with pale blue skin and sharp features. They wore elaborate ceremonial robes that marked their high status in their warrior culture. Commander Velthari, the ambassador's military escort, stood rigid in her formal uniform, decorated with medals and honor ribbons. Minji's holographic butterflies danced higher, and she jumped up to reach them. One butterfly sparkled just out of reach. She stretched on her tiptoes, laughing with delight. The toy's projector shifted, and suddenly the butterflies swirled in a new pattern that took them directly toward the Altarian delegation. The child ran after her butterflies, not seeing anything but the pretty lights. She bumped into Commander Velthari's ceremonial robe. The impact was gentle, but Minji's small hands left tiny prints on the pristine fabric as she steadied herself. "I'm sorry," Minji said automatically, the way her father had taught her. She looked up at the tall alien, with wide, innocent eyes. The entire plaza seemed to freeze. Commander Velthari stared down at the child with growing horror and rage. In Altarian culture, touching ceremonial garments, without permission, was a grave insult. The fact that it was a child, and a human child at that, made it worse. "You dare touch the sacred robes of an Altarian commander?" Velthari's voice cut through the noise of the plaza like a blade. Several aliens nearby tried to intervene. "Commander, she's just a child," said a Thylorian diplomat. "She doesn't understand your customs." Dr. Park looked up from his work, seeing his daughter surrounded by tall aliens. He dropped his tools and started moving toward her. But he was too far away. "Ignorance is no excuse for disrespect," Velthari declared. "This creature must learn proper behavior." Minji stepped backward, suddenly afraid. She didn't understand what was happening, but the tall alien's anger was clear. "Daddy?" she called out in a small voice. Commander Velthari raised her hand and struck Minji across the face with the back of her hand. The blow sent the small child flying backward. Minji hit the floor hard and lay still, blood trickling from her nose. The plaza fell completely silent. Every conversation stopped. Every movement ceased. The only sound was the gentle splash of the fountain and Dr. Park's running footsteps. "Minji." Dr. Park dropped to his knees beside his daughter. She was unconscious, her face already swelling. He gathered her carefully in his arms, checking for serious injuries. His hands shook as he touched the blood on her face. Captain Jin So-jun arrived within minutes. The human security chief had been in his office when the emergency alert came through. He took in the scene, with cold, calculating eyes. His gaze moved from the unconscious child to Commander Velthari, who stood with her chin raised defiantly. Other humans began to gather. Station workers abandoned their tasks. Off-duty personnel appeared from nearby shops and restaurants. They formed a loose circle around the scene, their faces showing a mixture of shock and something much more dangerous. Jin approached Commander Velthari with slow, measured steps. His voice was quiet when he spoke, but somehow everyone in the plaza could hear him clearly. "Commander, you have made a grave error. I suggest you and your delegation leave this station immediately." Velthari laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "You dare threaten a warrior of the Altarian Empire over a mere child's lesson in respect?" The creature touched sacred garments. The punishment was appropriate. "That was not a threat, Commander," Jin replied, his voice still calm. That was a courtesy. The last one you'll receive. Ambassador Kethval stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with how quickly the situation was escalating. Captain Jin. Surely we can resolve this through diplomatic channels. Commander Velthari was upholding our cultural protocols. Your cultural protocols, Jin said, without taking his eyes off Velthari, do not include striking children. Not on this station. Not anywhere humans have influence. Dr. Park stood up, his daughter limp in his arms. She needs medical attention immediately, he said, his voice breaking. Take her to medical bay, Jin ordered. Dr. Kim is already on her way. As Dr. Park carried Minji away, more humans continued to arrive. They didn't speak or make threats. They simply stood and watched. Their silence was somehow more unsettling than shouting would have been. Commander Velthari shifted uncomfortably under their stares. I acted within my rights according to Galactic Treaty, she declared. Multiple articles support the enforcement of cultural respect protocols. Perhaps you should review those treaties more carefully, Jin suggested. Especially the sections about actions taken against non-combatant civilians. Children, specifically. The creature, her name is Minji, Jin interrupted, his calm finally cracking slightly. She is 7 years old. She was playing with a toy, and you struck her unconscious for the crime of being a child. The weight of human eyes continued to grow as more staff members arrived. Maintenance workers, shopkeepers, teachers, engineers, and scientists all stood in silent witness. None of them spoke, but their presence said everything that needed to be said. Ambassador Kethval touched Velthari's arm. Commander, perhaps we should retire to our quarters while this matter is sorted out. But Velthari was too proud to back down. I will not be intimidated by these humans. I acted correctly, according to law and honor. Jin nodded slowly. Very well, Commander. You've made your position clear. Now we'll make ours clear. He turned and walked away without another word. The other humans began to disperse. But slowly, reluctantly, they cast long looks back at the Altarian delegation before returning to their duties. Commander Velthari stood in the plaza, still defiant but somehow diminished. She didn't yet understand that she had just crossed a line that humans never allowed anyone to cross. She had struck a child, and nothing would ever be the same. In the medical bay, Dr. Park held his daughter's hand, while Dr. Kim worked to save her life. And across the galaxy, word was already beginning to spread about what had happened on New Geneva Station. Dr. Sarah Kim worked frantically over Minji's small form in the medical bay. The child's breathing was shallow, and the scans showed dangerous swelling in her brain. Dr. Park stood beside the bed, holding his daughter's tiny hand, his face pale with worry. How bad is it? He whispered. Severe concussion, Dr. Kim replied, not looking up from her instruments. Internal bleeding. Her small body took a tremendous impact. I'm doing everything I can. Outside the medical bay, the entire human crew of New Geneva Station had gathered. They stood in the corridors, silent and grim. Word spread through their ranks in whispers. A 7-year-old girl, playing with a toy, struck unconscious by an alien officer for accidentally bumping into her. Captain Jin stood apart from the crowd, speaking quietly into his communicator. He wasn't making speeches or issuing orders. He was simply making calls. One by one, he contacted human captains, administrators, and colony leaders across the galaxy. The conversations were brief and direct. Jin explained what had happened, then listened to the responses. Each person he spoke to promised to spread the word further. By the end of the first hour, the news was traveling through subspace communications faster than cargo ships could move. On Earth, Admiral Chen received the report during a routine briefing. She read it twice, then stood and walked to the window overlooking the shipyards. Send word to all human vessels. she said to her aide. Navigation updates are available for ships currently in transit. The aide looked confused. What kind of updates, Admiral? The kind that might require course corrections toward the New Geneva sector. On the mining colony of Kepler 442, Director Williams called an emergency meeting. I'm suspending all shipments to Altarian space indefinitely, she announced to the surprised board members. Technical difficulties with our transport systems. Technical difficulties? Asked the chief engineer. I wasn't aware of any problems. Williams' expression was stone cold. There are now. The pattern repeated across human space. On research stations, cargo depots, agricultural worlds, and trade hubs, the same conversations took place. Human administrators found sudden reasons to delay, postpone, or cancel their dealings with anyone who supported the Altarian Empire. Back on New Geneva Station, Ambassador Kethval tried to contact the Galactic Council. She reached Ambassador Tivek, of the Thylorian Collective, expecting support for upholding cultural protocols. Ambassador Kethval, Tivek said carefully, I have been monitoring the situation. Perhaps it would be wise to reconsider your position. Reconsider what? Commander Velthari acted within established diplomatic rights. The human child showed disrespect for our sacred customs. There was a long pause. In my 3 centuries of diplomatic service, Tivek finally said, I have studied many species. The humans are still new to our community. But I have observed something about them that concerns me. And what is that? They have remarkable unity when it comes to protecting their young, all of them, everywhere. I have never seen a species mobilize so completely and so quietly when their children are threatened. Ambassador Kethval dismissed the warning. The humans are traders and engineers. They're not warriors like us. That may be your greatest misunderstanding, Tuvek replied before ending the call. In the medical bay, Minji's condition stabilized but remained critical. Dr. Kim shared updates with the gathered humans every hour. Each bulletin was immediately transmitted to human communities across the galaxy, adding fuel to the growing fire of human determination. The first ships began arriving at New Geneva Station within 12 hours. They weren't warships or military vessels. Instead, cargo haulers, research ships, and passenger transports started taking positions around the station. They didn't announce hostile intent or make demands. They simply arrived and waited. Captain Rourke of the cargo ship, Harmony, was among the first to arrive. When Station Control asked for his purpose, he replied simply, routine security patrol. Nothing to worry about. Cargo ships don't conduct security patrols, the controller pointed out. They do now, Rourke replied. More ships continued to arrive throughout the day. The Endeavour, a deep space research vessel, took position near the main shipping lanes. The New Soul, a passenger liner, positioned itself to monitor all incoming traffic. The Prairie Wind, an agricultural transport, stationed itself near the cargo docks. None of them blocked traffic or prevented other ships from moving freely. They were simply there, watching and waiting. Their presence made everyone nervous, especially the Altarian delegation. Commander Velthari remained in her quarters, protected by diplomatic immunity. She issued a statement through Ambassador Kethval, expressing regret that the child was injured but maintaining that her actions were justified under galactic law. The statement was broadcast across the human networks. The response was immediate and coordinated. Human engineers working on alien worlds began requesting emergency leave to attend to family matters. Human traders discovered technical problems that would delay shipments to Altarian space for weeks. On the space station Proxima Base, Chief Engineer Lieutenant Park noticed that all 5 human technicians had submitted leave requests within an hour of each other. This is highly unusual, she told them. We can't shut down essential systems. Then maybe you should have thought about that before one of your allies decided to beat up a 7-year-old girl, replied Senior Engineer Martinez. We're leaving. Find someone else to fix your problems. The pattern repeated across the galaxy. Human workers didn't quit their jobs or abandon their posts. They simply exercised their rights to take leave time, all at once, for the same reason. By the end of the second day, the Galactic Trade Commission noticed severe disruptions in interstellar commerce. Shipping delays were cascading across multiple star systems. Critical repairs were being postponed. Communication systems were running on backup power because human technicians were unavailable. Ambassador Keth Vall called an emergency meeting with the station administrators. This economic pressure is unacceptable. It amounts to terrorism. Director Chen Wei-Ming, the human station administrator, looked genuinely confused. Economic pressure? I'm not sure what you mean. Our staff members are taking legally entitled personal leave time. That's their right, under galactic employment law. All at the same time? For the same reason? Family emergencies are often urgent matters, Director Chen replied with a straight face. I'm sure you understand the importance of family in human culture. This cannot continue. The disruption to commerce will harm innocent parties. I agree completely, Director Chen said, which is why it's so unfortunate that an innocent 7-year-old girl was harmed. Perhaps if that situation were resolved, our staff members would feel more comfortable returning to their duties. Captain Jin made one final broadcast that evening, transmitted across all human networks. His message was simple and direct. Commander Velthari will be held accountable for her actions against Minji Park. This is not a request for justice. This is a statement of fact. What happens next depends on how quickly the galactic community chooses to act. In the medical bay, Dr. Park continued his vigil beside his daughter's bed. Minji's small chest rose and fell steadily, but she remained unconscious. Dr. Kim was cautiously optimistic about her recovery, but warned that brain injuries in children could have unpredictable consequences. Around the galaxy, more ships continued to change course toward New Geneva Station. The quiet mobilization was entering its second phase, and the galactic community was beginning to realize that they had seriously underestimated the humans. The humans weren't threatening war or violence. They were doing something much more sophisticated and much more dangerous. They were showing the entire galaxy exactly how much they depended on human cooperation to function, and that cooperation could be withdrawn just as easily as it had been given. 3 days after the incident, Minji's condition improved slightly. Her eyes fluttered open for brief moments, but she remained confused and weak. Doctor. Artena in our country. Kim continued monitoring her brain activity carefully, watching for signs of permanent damage. Dr. Park rarely left his daughter's side. He talked to her constantly, reading her favorite stories and singing the lullabies she loved. Every small improvement was immediately shared with the human networks across the galaxy. Each update strengthened the resolve of millions of humans who had never met the little girl but felt connected to her suffering. The number of ships around New Geneva Station continued to grow. By the third day, over 200 human vessels had taken positions in the system. They formed a loose perimeter around all major shipping routes. Not quite a blockade, but something close to it. Captain Morrison of the mining ship Iron Mountain was among the newest arrivals. When asked by station control about his purpose, he replied, "Delivering essential supplies to human personnel." "What kind of supplies?" the controller asked. "The kind that might be needed for an extended stay," Morrison answered. The ships weren't military vessels, but their sheer number was impressive. Cargo haulers sat next to research ships. Agricultural transports floated beside passenger liners. Mining vessels shared space with scientific explorers. It was the largest gathering of civilian ships anyone had ever seen in one place. Trade through the system slowed to a crawl. Ships carrying goods to Altarian space found themselves subjected to detailed inspections that took hours instead of minutes. Human customs officers apologized for the delays, explaining that new security protocols required more thorough examinations. "Security protocols?" asked Captain Vextar of the Altarian cargo ship. "Pride of Empire." "Yes," replied Inspector Chang with a polite smile. We've had reports of dangerous materials being smuggled through this sector. We have to check everything very carefully now. It might take several days to complete your inspection. Captain Vextar's cargo was nothing but grain and basic supplies. The inspection that should have taken 30 minutes stretched into its second day with no end in sight. The economic impact spread far beyond the New Geneva system. On the industrial world of Titan 7, the main fusion reactor began experiencing technical difficulties. The human chief engineer, Dr. Patel, submitted a report explaining that critical components needed replacement. "How long will the repairs take?" asked the Altarian plant supervisor. "That depends on when the replacement parts arrive," Dr. Patel replied. "I've placed an order, but our usual suppliers are experiencing delays." "What kind of delays?" "The kind that happen when suppliers decide they don't want to do business with certain customers," Dr. Patel said bluntly. Similar problems emerged across the galaxy. Altarian shipping companies discovered that their contracts with human transport services were being terminated due to irreconcilable differences. Altarian colonies found that their food imports were delayed because of quality control issues. Altarian military bases experienced communication blackouts when human technicians found system incompatibilities that required extended repairs. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss the growing crisis. Ambassador Kethval expected support from the Council, but the response was lukewarm at best. "The humans are disrupting interstellar commerce," she argued. "This economic terrorism must be stopped immediately." Ambassador Quilex of the Zephyrian Trade Federation looked uncomfortable. "With respect, Ambassador Kethval, the humans aren't actually breaking any laws. They have the right to choose their trading partners and employment arrangements. But the coordinated nature of their actions is impressive," interrupted Ambassador Tevek. "But not illegal. They're exercising their economic freedom simultaneously, which is their right." Xbar. "Well, Xbard, what about the impact on innocent parties?" Chancellor Mordun of the Hegemony spoke up. "Perhaps the impact wouldn't be so severe if the Altarian Empire had better relationships with other species. The humans aren't the only ones questioning your actions regarding the child." Commander Velthari, meanwhile, remained in her quarters on New Geneva Station. She had issued several statements defending her actions, but each one only seemed to make the situation worse. Her latest declaration called the human response an overreaction to necessary discipline, and demanded that galactic law enforce respect for Altarian customs. The statement was broadcast across human networks and met with cold silence. No human official responded directly, but the message was clear. More ships arrived at New Geneva. More contracts were quietly terminated. More technical difficulties mysteriously appeared wherever Altarians conducted business. On the fourth day, the Altarian Emperor himself sent a private message to Ambassador Kethval. The content was brief and direct. "Resolve this situation immediately, or face personal consequences for allowing it to escalate beyond control." Kethval finally understood the gravity of the situation. She requested a private meeting with Captain Jin and Director Chen. The meeting took place in a small conference room, with only the three of them present. "Captain Jin," Kethval began carefully, "I believe there has been a misunderstanding about our cultural requirements." "No misunderstanding," Jin replied quietly. "Your officer struck a 7-year-old child. That's the only fact that matters. But surely there must be some way to resolve this through diplomatic channels." Commander Velthari was acting according to our laws and customs. Director Chen leaned forward. "Ambassador, let me explain something about human culture. We don't care about your laws when they conflict with basic decency. We don't care about your customs when they involve hurting children. We don't care about your diplomatic immunity when it protects people who attack the innocent. Then what do you want?" "Justice," Jin said simply. Real consequences for real actions. Commander Velthari assaulted a child. She needs to face trial for that assault. A B. Real. That's impossible. She has diplomatic immunity. Then revoke it, Director Chen suggested. Your people granted it. Your people can take it away. Kethval shook her head. The political consequences would be enormous. I could lose my position, my status, everything. Jin's expression didn't change. Ambassador, do you know what Minji Park lost when your commander hit her? Her sense of safety, her trust in adults, her belief that the world is a safe place for children. She lost things that might never come back. But she's recovering, isn't she? Her body is healing, Jin acknowledged. Her mind is a different matter. She wakes up screaming from nightmares. She flinches when tall people approach her. She asks her father why the tall lady hurt her for playing. The room fell silent. Ambassador Kethval stared at the table, finally beginning to understand the true scope of what had happened. What happens if I refuse? She asked quietly. Director Chen gestured toward the window, where dozens of human ships were visible in the distance. This continues and grows. Every day, more ships arrive. Every day, more human workers find reasons to take leave. Every day, the economic pressure increases. For how long? Until justice is served, Jin said. However long that takes. Ambassador Kethval left the meeting with much to consider. She had expected the humans to make threats or demands. Instead, they had simply explained the reality of the situation. The choice was hers, but the consequences were already in motion. That evening, she sent an encrypted message to the Altarian Emperor. The reply came back within hours. One word. Resolve. End quote. The storm was gathering strength, and everyone involved was beginning to realize that it wouldn't end until Minji Park received the justice she deserved. On the fifth day, the Altarian Empire made a decision that would prove to be their greatest mistake. Instead of seeking compromise, they chose escalation. A battle fleet of 12 warships jumped into the New Geneva system, led by Admiral Kexral, aboard the flagship Honor's Edge. The Altarian fleet took aggressive positions near the human ships, weapons powered but not targeted. Admiral Kexral broadcast a message on all frequencies, demanding that the humans cease their economic terrorism and return to their normal duties immediately. Captain Jin received the message in his office, surrounded by human ship captains who had gathered for their daily coordination meeting. He listened to the Admiral's demands without expression, then turned to his colleagues. Thoughts? He asked simply. Captain Rourke of the Harmony spoke first. They're trying to intimidate us with military force. Classic Altarian response to any challenge. Numbers? Jin asked. 12 warships versus 230 civilian vessels. Replied Captain Morrison. They could destroy us all. Easily enough. But they won't. Added Captain Kim of the research ship Discovery. Too many witnesses. Too many species watching. They'd lose all credibility with the galactic community. Jin nodded. So we continue as planned. No escalation on our part. No military response. We're just civilian ships going about our business. Instead of matching the military escalation, something unprecedented happened across the galaxy. The human response grew larger, but remained completely peaceful. On every human world, colony, and station, civilians began the largest coordinated protest in galactic history. They didn't destroy anything or harm anyone. They simply stopped working for any organization that traded with or supported the Altarian Empire. The protest was silent, dignified, and absolutely devastating in its scope. On the trade hub of Kepler Station, human dock workers reported for their shifts but refused to handle any cargo destined for Altarian space. When their supervisors threatened to fire them, they replied that they would accept termination rather than support a government that protected child abusers. On the agricultural world of New Harvest, Human farmers stopped delivering food to companies that supplied Altarian colonies. "We grow food to feed children," explained farmer Chen Luwei to the frustrated buyers. "We won't help feed people who think it's acceptable to hurt them." The mathematical calculations done by Galactic Trade Commission were sobering. Humans represented 23% of all technical specialists, 31% of interstellar transport operators, and 45% of deep space engineers across known space. Their simultaneous withdrawal from Altarian-related work would collapse entire economic sectors within weeks. Chancellor Mordoon of the hegemony called an emergency meeting with other major powers. "This situation is spiraling beyond anyone's ability to control it," he warned. "We need to find a solution before it damages the entire galactic economy." "The solution is simple," replied Ambassador Tevek. "The Altarians must hold their officer accountable for assaulting a child. This is a matter of basic justice." "But the precedent," began Ambassador Quillex. "The precedent is that children of all species deserve protection from adult violence," Tevek interrupted. "If we cannot agree on that basic principle, then perhaps we need to reconsider our entire system of galactic governance." On New Geneva Station, Minji finally woke up fully conscious for the first time since the attack. Dr. Kim ran thorough tests, while Dr. Park held his daughter's hand, tears streaming down his face. "Daddy," Minji asked in a small, confused voice. "Why does my head hurt? Why am I in the hospital?" Dr. Park struggled to find words that a 7-year-old could understand. "You had an accident, sweetheart. You bumped your head, but you're going to be okay." "Did I do something bad?" she asked, her eyes wide with worry. "Is that why the tall lady was angry at me?" "No, baby," Dr. Park whispered. "You didn't do anything wrong. You were just playing, like you always do." The tall lady made a mistake. The moment was broadcast live across human networks, with Dr. Park's permission. Millions of humans watched a confused, injured child ask if she had done something to deserve being hurt. The response was immediate and emotional. On Earth, Admiral Chen watched the broadcast from her office. She had been a military officer for 30 years, had seen combat in 3 wars, and prided herself on maintaining professional composure. But watching Minji ask if she was to blame for her own assault broke something inside her. She turned to her aide with tears in her eyes. "Send word to all human naval vessels. Any ship that can reach the New Geneva system without abandoning critical duties is authorized to do so. This is not a military deployment. This is a humanitarian escort." Similar orders went out from human military commands across the galaxy. The ships that began moving toward New Geneva were not preparing for war. They were preparing to bear witness to justice. Back in the system, Admiral Kexral grew increasingly frustrated with the human response to his show of force. Instead of being intimidated, more ships continued to arrive daily. Worse, his own crews were beginning to express doubts about their mission. "Admiral," reported his intelligence officer, "we're receiving communications from Altarian crews throughout the fleet. Many of them have children at home. They're uncomfortable with our defense of Commander Velthari's actions." "It doesn't matter what they're comfortable with," Kexral snapped. "Yes, sir. But some of them are asking to review the recordings of the incident. They want to see exactly what happened." Kexral had seen the recordings. Every military commander in the galaxy had been provided with footage of the assault. Watching Commander Velthari strike a small, innocent child was disturbing even by Altarian standards. But military discipline demanded loyalty to fellow officers. The Zephyrian Trade Federation made the first official break with the Altarian position. They announced that Altarian ships would not be welcome in Zephyrian space until the current diplomatic situation is resolved to the satisfaction of all parties. Other governments quickly followed suit. The Thylorian Collective suspended all trade agreements with the Altarian Empire. The hegemony recalled their ambassador from the Altarian capital. Even the militaristic Corvan Republic issued a statement expressing concern about the treatment of civilian children in diplomatic incidents. Commander Velthari, still in her quarters on New Geneva Station, received word that her own government was beginning to distance themselves from her actions. Junior officers in the Altarian military were privately questioning whether striking a child was truly compatible with their honor codes. The commander who had once stood proud and defiant now found herself increasingly isolated. Even among her own people, support for her position was crumbling. The weight of galactic opinion was turning against her, and there seemed to be no way to stop it. Ambassador Kethval received her final orders from the Emperor. Resolve this situation within 24 hours, by any means necessary, or face charges of criminal negligence in handling diplomatic relations. Standing at her window, looking out at the hundreds of human ships that now surrounded the station, Kethval finally understood that pride had led her people into an impossible position. They could either sacrifice one officer's career or watch their entire empire become isolated from the galactic community. The choice, when viewed clearly, was obvious, but making it would require admitting that the humans had been right from the beginning. Some things were more important than cultural pride or military loyalty. The protection of children was one of those things. That night, Kethval sent a message to Captain Jin requesting another meeting. This time, she would not be negotiating from a position of strength. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on New Geneva Station itself, in the main conference hall, where representatives from every major species gathered to witness the proceedings. The decision to hold the tribunal on the station where the incident occurred was deliberate and symbolic. Ambassador Kethval sat at the defendant's table with Commander Velthari, who had finally been stripped of her diplomatic immunity by direct order of the Altarian Emperor. The legal team representing them looked uncomfortable and outnumbered. At the prosecutor's table sat legal advocates for the galactic community, but the real power in the room came from the human section where Dr. Park sat holding Minji's hand. The little girl was still weak but insisted on attending because, as she told her father, "I want to tell everyone I didn't do anything bad." Captain Jin served as the primary witness, but he wouldn't be speaking alone. Representatives from dozens of species had volunteered to testify about the fundamental principles of protecting children across all cultures. The presiding judge was Chancellor Mordun, chosen because his species had a reputation for absolute fairness. He called the session to order with grave formality. "We are here to determine responsibility for the assault of a child," he began. "This is not a trial about cultural differences or diplomatic protocol. This is about justice for Minji Park." Commander Velthari's defense attorney stood first. "Honorable Chancellor, my client acted according to established Altarian cultural law. The touching of ceremonial garments without permission is a serious offense that demands correction." "Correction of whom?" Chancellor Mordun asked. "A 7-year-old child who was playing with a toy?" "Cultural education begins early in all species," the attorney replied. "The child needed to learn appropriate behavior around superior beings." A murmur of disapproval rippled through the chamber. Dr. Park's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, as Jin had advised. The prosecutor called Dr. Yenna Velmoth, a child development specialist from the peaceful Aquilan species. Her testimony was devastating in its simplicity. "Children of all species share common developmental patterns," Dr. Velmoth explained. "At 7 years of age, the concepts of cultural superiority, ceremonial significance, and deliberate disrespect are beyond their cognitive capacity. Minji Park was incapable of intentional insult because her brain has not yet developed the structures necessary to understand such abstract concepts. So, when she bumped into Commander Velthari, it was purely accidental. Not just accidental, but inevitable. Children that age focus on immediate, concrete objects like toys. They are literally incapable of the situational awareness that adults possess. Expecting a 7-year-old to navigate complex diplomatic protocols is like expecting a bird to solve mathematical equations." The defense attorney tried to challenge the testimony. "But surely discipline helps children learn appropriate behavior?" "Appropriate discipline, yes, Doctor," Velmoth replied firmly. Violence against children for innocent behavior causes trauma, fear, and psychological damage. It teaches them nothing except to fear adults. Captain Jin was called to testify next. He spoke calmly and factually about the incident, but his words carried weight because everyone in the chamber knew about the massive human response his simple reports had triggered. Commander Velthari had multiple options when Minji accidentally touched her robes, Jin explained. She could have gently moved the child away. She could have asked Dr. Park to retrieve his daughter. She could have simply ignored a harmless accident. Instead, she chose violence against a child who weighed less than 30 kilograms and posed no threat to anyone. What was the impact of this violence on the child? The prosecutor asked. Severe concussion, internal bleeding, psychological trauma, and ongoing nightmares. Minji still flinches when tall people approach her. She asks her father repeatedly if she did something wrong to deserve being hurt. The most powerful moment came when Dr. Park was asked to bring Minji to the witness stand. The little girl looked very small in the large chair, but she spoke clearly when Chancellor Mordun asked her to explain what happened. I was playing with my butterflies, Minji said in her high, clear voice. They were so pretty, and they flew around me. I tried to catch them, but they went up high. I jumped to reach them, and I bumped into the tall lady. I said I was sorry because Daddy taught me to always say sorry when I bump into someone. What happened next? Chancellor Mordun asked gently. The tall lady was very angry. She yelled at me with words I didn't understand. I got scared and called for my daddy, but she hit me really hard, and I fell down. When I woke up, my head hurt very bad, and I was in the hospital. Do you understand why she hit you? Minji's eyes filled with tears. I don't know. I said I was sorry. I didn't mean to bump into her. I was just trying to catch my butterflies. The chamber was completely silent, except for the sound of the child's quiet crying. Even Commander Velthari looked uncomfortable for the first time since the proceedings began. Chancellor Mordun asked the final question. Minji, what would you like to happen to the person who hurt you? The 7-year-old thought seriously for a moment. I want her to say she's sorry for hurting me. And I want her to promise not to hurt other kids who are just playing. One do. The defense tried to argue that Velthari had acted within her legal rights, but their position crumbled under the weight of testimony from experts, witnesses, and the child herself. Multiple species representatives testified that protecting children from adult violence was a universal principle that transcended cultural differences. Chancellor Mordun deliberated for only 30 minutes before returning with the verdict. Commander Velthari, you have been found guilty of unprovoked assault against a child. The court recognizes no cultural exception for violence against innocent children, regardless of the species involved. The sentence was comprehensive. Velthari was stripped of all military rank and honors, banned from holding any position of authority over others, and exiled from the Altarian military. She would be required to undergo mandatory education about interspecies, interaction, and child development. Most importantly, she would publicly apologize to Minji Park before the entire galactic community. The apology ceremony took place in the same plaza where the assault had occurred. Velthari knelt before Minji while millions watched across the galaxy. Her words were carefully chosen and clearly audible. Minji Park, I was wrong to hurt you. You did nothing bad. You were just playing, like children should play. I ask for your forgiveness, and I promise to learn how to be better around children. Minji looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. Then she looked back at Velthari, with the serious expression that children use for important moments. I forgive you, she said simply. But don't hurt any more kids, okay? I promise. Velthari replied. And for the first time since the incident, she seemed to genuinely understand the gravity of what she had done. The tribunal established the Minji Protocol, a galactic law specifically protecting children of all species from adult retaliation for innocent behavior. Any adult who harmed a child would face immediate universal sanctions, regardless of cultural claims or diplomatic status. Human workers gradually returned to their positions across the galaxy. But the precedent was established. The galactic community had learned that humans would mobilize completely to protect innocence, and that their cooperation could not be taken for granted. The human ships around New Geneva Station began to disperse, their mission accomplished. As they departed, each ship broadcast the same message. Justice for Minji Park has been served. The children of the galaxy are safer today. Minji returned to playing in the plaza. But now she was watched over by volunteers from dozens of species who had committed themselves to ensuring her safety. Her laughter echoed through the station, a sound that had become precious to everyone who understood how close they had come to losing something irreplaceable. Dr. Park filed his final report on the incident. "My daughter is healing well. She plays without fear again. The galaxy has learned that children must be protected above all else. The humans have proven that quiet determination and moral clarity can change the universe." Mission accomplished. The little girl who had accidentally bumped into an alien's robes while chasing holographic butterflies had become the symbol of universal justice. Her innocence had united an entire species and taught the galaxy that some principles were worth any sacrifice to defend. Minji Park could play safely again, and that was all that mattered.